I'm Tracy, I'm an alcoholic. I'm super excited to be here today. For some reason I'm as nervous as I think I was in my first year. But what made me think, like the last few days I've been reflecting, and in 15 years in recovery, I'm like, the different venues I've been at, the different stages in my life that I was at. So every year I was kind of like, my first year shared was like, I don't know, I was a celebrity, my whole family had to come, and it was all of that pressure. I don't know, in those years that's what we used to do, our whole family came. I mean, how awkward now, I think about it, oh my gosh. But, and it was different people in my life at that time, and that's kind of what I've experienced. The longer I've been in recovery, everything changes. Like I've had different people in my life, different journeys, different things I've gone through each year, and it's kind of made me reflect on that. And also when my dad sent me a message for my 15 years on the 3rd, he's like, well done, Trace. I never thought that it would be possible for you to get clean and sober. I'm like, well, thanks, Dad. And it was true, because when I came in, I was hopeless. I wasn't one of those people that decided that this was the end, I'd had enough. It's a good idea to drive myself into rehab and this is amazing, I want to get clean, because that wasn't my experience at all. Mine was that I was in denial. I thought everyone else had a problem. I was on so much medication, I couldn't tell what was right and what was wrong. I didn't even think that there was another life possible. I just thought my life was normal and everyone lived like that until I came into treatment. So right from like my first memories were a lot of fighting in my house. There was a lot of agitation, there was a lot of abuse. My dad had been to the army and Angola War, and he was an alcoholic, and I had a lot of that growing up. My family fought a lot. I remember my mom and my dad fighting a lot. Those are my first memories. And my parents actually got divorced, I think when I was about 3 or 4, and I went to go live with my mom. And my mom and I, it was like, it was just her and I against the world. We didn't have a lot of money, and she had to work a lot. She was also a beautician, and I remember being at school for a long time, and I hated that. And I had my 6th birthday, and I remember she took a week off, and we spent a lot of time together. And first day going back to school, we got into the car and whatever, and I packed her basket to Red Robots, and my mum died, and I was in the car. And my whole life changed. It was one of the most tragic things that I ever had to go through. I definitely don't think that's why I'm an addict and alcoholic. I think my behaviour started way before that. And when I kind of look at that, I remember having temper tantrums with my mom because I couldn't get my way, because I like Tracy's way. And if I couldn't get that, I remember being locked in my room. And I remember the once I tore up her gown, like I cut it up. I think I was 3 or 4. I think I told my daughter, but she probably just done the same thing as me, so I'm like, oh. But I had that vengefulness, you know what I mean? And I was willful from that age, and I kind of knew that. But I remember that that part of my life was very sad. I remember no one really knew what to do. There's no handbook on a 6-year-old mother dying. So everyone at that time tried to do what they thought was right. I didn't ever go to a funeral. I never had closure. I remember the day very clearly though, because I remember all the kids being together and all the adults being really sad. I remember lots of like flowers in the house and stuff. But no one kind of knew what to say. And in my memory, my dad told me a couple of weeks later, because I was also obviously injured. And in my mind, I thought that he told me I ate chocolate and went to bed. And he's like, no, that wasn't really what happened. Like I screamed the house down and I wasn't okay. And that's how I kind of had to learn. Like I had to learn those coping mechanisms. And there was a lot of change for a long time. I lived with my dad for a while, and then my gran, and I was all over the place, and I never really had much stability. But they did try. Like I never ever thought that in my addiction. I was like, they never did good enough, well enough. But now I kind of see it was different. So I lived with my dad for a while. He married my mom's best friend. She was my stepmom. She did the best she could for me. I went to private schools. I had all the best things. The first school I went to, I was told not to. They teased me a lot because my mom died. Little kids can be cruel. So the second school, I was told not to tell anyone. So I kind of lived with the secret for so long until I was about 13, and I was like, hey, she's actually not really my mom. I haven't seen my gran for ages because they took me away from my gran, and I kind of started having this rebellious thing. And I changed lots of schools. My dad tried to always find the best fit for me, and each time I tried to change schools, it was harder and harder for me to make friends. It was harder for me to fit in. I always felt out, and I didn't really know that why. Like, I just thought it was my mom dying. I didn't really know that there was something else. And then when I was 13, 14, my first brother was born, and all of a sudden I wasn't in the centre of attention anymore. I was jealous. I hated him. I hated everybody. And the decision to go to boarding school was the best thing at that stage. I thought maybe it was better and I could go and start my own life, even though I felt abandoned at that stage. And I went to the same boarding school my dad went to. And he had these high aspirations for me. I was going to become head girl. I got everything. Everything was great. I passed all the tests. And as soon as I got in the outfitted in with all the rebels, I was like, I was smoking. I was doing, if anything got into trouble, it was always me. Like, it was just, and I just kind of fitted in. I was like, great, this is amazing. I love boarding school because I could kind of get away with it. And so that was the first time I had my first drink. There was a social, and I had a fight with my friend, my girlfriend. She abandoned me as well. And someone came out at the social, and the day boarders came in, and they bought a bottle of tequila. I had no idea what it was. Everyone was passing it around, and I'm like, well, this is great. And all of a sudden, like, I'd forgotten that I was fighting with a friend. I forgot that I hated my family so much. I forgot that I felt like abandoned. And all those feelings went away. And everyone just had one sip, and they went back into the party, and everything was fine. And I kept on wanting to go back. I didn't know, like, I just loved that feeling that everything went away. And I carried on and on and on until eventually I was so drunk that I blacked out. But just before I blacked out, I went into the bathroom to try and make myself throw up, and the next thing I saw the head girl above me, and she goes, Tracy, what's wrong? And I'm going, oh no, I've had fruit and I'm allergic to fruit. I had frozen yogurt. And she's like, there's no fruit in there. She's like, please walk a straight line. I had to get out the bathroom first. And then try and walk a straight line, and then she was like, you know, okay, and I had to go to the principal's house. And I sung like a bird because I was so fearful. I told him exactly where I got everything. I was like, and then I was so nobody liked me at school. And I was so dramatic that I decided I was going to kill myself. So the next morning after my blackout, I woke up and I was tied to my bed and I had no jewelry on. And I had a very bad headache. And the reality hit me. So my first drunk was complete blackout, and that kind of like stayed with me. My stepmom wanted nothing to do with me because I had 3 brothers at that stage. She's like, you're not coming home. And my stuff was in black bags. So for the second time in my life, I felt abandoned in my home. Never saw it was my behavior. Never saw that I did anything wrong. It was always them. And I went to go live with my aunt and my uncle and my 3 cousins in Kempton Park. So I came from the north, and all of a sudden I was going to live in the east, and it was very different for me because all of a sudden we had money and then there was no money, and it was very, very different. And again, I felt very abandoned and alone. And I didn't know how to cope. And the school that took me said, look, you've just been expelled. We're not going to put up with this rubbish. Like, if you don't get with the program, then you're out. I don't know where you're going to go. And I was like, oh gosh. So, like a true addict and alcoholic, I kind of put on a mask and I conformed for quite a long time. And I just kind of, I hated it. I used to wish that I was going to have another accident on the way to school because I hated school so much. But then I learned to sleep and I learned to escape and I learned to just not be there. So I would go to school. I was allowed to smoke there. I wasn't allowed to drink because my uncle was an alcoholic and my aunt was very, very strict about that kind of stuff. But then I'd go home and sleep and escape. And when I was 16, I went on to my first antidepressants to try and cope and try and be okay, because I just had that like aloneness all the time. I didn't know how to get rid of that feeling. Standard 9, I failed standard 9 because I hated school so much and really apply myself. And so I had 2 choices. Could either redo standard 9 and a trick, and that was like horrible. I was like, no ways. And I went to college, and I just loved college because there was no rules. Wear a skirt as short as you want, doesn't matter if your fringes in your eyes, you could smoke. I was like, woohoo, I've made it. Obviously, first friends, the drinkers and the smokers, that was where I kind of fitted in always. Those are my people. You guys are still my people. You know what I mean? But we're all in recovery, and that's where you guys are where I feel the best. And yeah, so I started drinking, and my aunt started seeing that there was something going on. I remember when I turned 18, I thought I was going to have a curfew, and she said, your curfew is 12 o'clock. I'm like, huh. So I didn't come home for 2 days, and then I got grounded. And at that stage, I went to go live with my dad, and he had just been, my stepmom had gone overseas, and he was divorced, and he was living the bachelor life. So 2 alcoholics together, that was great. We had a good time, and there were no rules with my dad. And I finished college, kind of had boyfriends along the way, and I went to go and work in a bar, which was really good. That's exactly where I should have been, because I learned to party and I drank quite a lot. I was working, drinking the whole night, every party, having to go sleep for 2 hours, kind of work, and that was my thing. But every time I drank, I blacked out. I was always in trouble. I always landed up in the wrong places at the wrong time, at the wrong whatever. And it started becoming a problem for me. And I kind of knew, I was like, Tracy, you're going to get yourself into big trouble now if you carry on like this. And I didn't know how to stop. I didn't really want to stop, really. I remember, at 19, my dad was staying in this boarding house type thing. And the guy that owned it was a recovering alcoholic. And I'd had a fight with my boyfriend at the time that also lived there. And he said, Tracy is like her dad. She's an alcoholic at the age of 19. And I was like, what? I'll show you. I won't drink. And I lasted about 3 hours. And then I was back out again. And at that kind of time, I just knew that I had to do something. And my best friend that I used to waitress with, she started going, she went to a rave. And she came back and she said, Tracy, I have just found the solution. She's like, I've gone to this rave, I've tried this thing, it's a pill, it's 50 rand, it lasts the whole night. I'm like, oh, okay, cool, I'm in. And I was always scared of drugs because of when I was 13, my dad found out that I was sniffing typic thinners, and he had this very different way of teaching me. He took me to Hillbrow, which is like 24 acre, and he showed me everything. He showed me the crack houses, he showed me the blue children, he showed me the prostitutes, he showed me everything. And then he took me into a rehab, and he's like, the lady showed me around, and she said, this is where you land up if you're very lucky. She's like, this is a private rehab, this is a heroin addicts detoxing, and I was like, oh my gosh, oh my god, I want to land there. And so I didn't, thank goodness, go into drugs until I was a bit older. And the first time I took my first drug, I was like, whoa, where have I been? I'm like, everyone is amazing, everyone looked beautiful, the music was amazing, everyone was washing each other's hair and massaging, and I'm like, wow, these are my people. I'm like, I'm done. And I loved it, and I lived in that for quite a long time, and I got into the rave scene, and I just loved it. I remember meeting my ex-husband at a Colcox rave, and that whole thing was mad as well. He was gay at the time. I was pregnant with a married man's child, and we just saw each other and we were like, wow, yeah, that's made in heaven, off we go. And everything from the outside looked good. Like, my parents thought this was amazing. My grand was like, finally, Tracy's going to settle down. And we had everyone fooled, because from the outside it looked great. But being in the garage, I'd started doing my apprenticeship, but we were using every weekend. And eventually, things stopped working. And it was kind of like, the more we wanted, the more we had, the more we wanted. And nothing kind of fulfilled that hole for both of us. And it became quite a toxic relationship. And I remember when I was about 21, I was in a big shopping centre, Cresta shopping centre. And the next thing I started getting really paranoid. And I felt there were cameras over me, I felt like the police were coming to get me, I felt the security, and I actually felt like going underneath the clothes and just sitting there. And I was like, there's something wrong. I'm like, I don't know, but I'm not okay, and there's something seriously wrong with me. And I went to the doctor, and then I went to my first psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist asked me all these lovely questions. So, do you this and this and this? And I was, not telling him that I'm using however many grams of coke or whatever. I just kind of was like, yes. And he's like, okay, this is borderline personality, post-traumatic stress, this. I'm like, yes, love it. Knew there was something wrong with me. Yes, thank you. And he came out with a script pad, and he was like, ooh. And I was like, wow. And then I landed up at a psych ward, and I'm like, this is cool. I'm like, you just got meds, you got food, you got whatever. I learned lots of arts and crafts and whatever. Rosating and decoupage, and I learned all of that stuff. And I was like, wow. But I had no solution to life. Like, I'd had lots of occupational therapists telling me how I should be living my balanced life and how I should be doing this. And I'm like, okay, cool. Great. But it wasn't for me. And I kind of went out again, and I kept on doing this. Every 18 months, and the time closer and closer and closer, until eventually I was 27, and I woke up one day and I was like, I can't be doing this. My ex-husband and I had kind of grown apart. His addiction went one way. He was gambling, online gambling, and using coke, and I was using medication and then wanting to party the whole weekend. And that's what I did, and our lives just grew very much apart. And one morning I woke up and I thought, what am I doing? What am I doing? I'm like, no, I don't need this. I don't need him. I don't need my 4 cats and my 2 dogs. I'm out. And I left. I didn't care what destruction I'd left behind me. I didn't care that we'd been married for 4 years. I didn't care any of that. And it was just Tracy's will, and that's what I cared about. I didn't realize I was the problem. I was like, he's the problem. He's whatever. I remember helping him get into rehab because he was about to lose his job. And I'd take him in and I'd be like the wonderful wife and I'd use his drugs and I'd see him and whatever. And that was kind of how it was. Until eventually, I was on my own. And my work, I was a hairdresser. I'd kind of done my apprenticeship. I'd qualified. I'd been there for 7 years. I'd worked myself up to management. And then kind of I nearly lost everything because I wasn't coming to work all the time. I had every excuse in the book. My bipolar medication was never right. I was never okay. And eventually when I decided I needed to get out of Joburg. I'm like, Joburg's the problem. Everybody's there, the Nigerians, I can't be doing this. And I'm like, I need to go to the, so I need to go see my grand and my aunt and live the coastal life. And I left everything. I didn't even get a farewell. They were like, please, Tracy, go. Like, we don't want you anymore. We can't fire you because you've been part of the family, but go. And I was very hurt, but I never saw that was mine. And I moved into Bellito. I bought myself a scooter with my money I got from my divorce. And I was going to live this like amazing life. I got a job quickly and I got a nice little place. But I followed. And in 6 months, I lost everything. I couldn't keep up my job. I remember coming into work, not even pitching. I had a wedding, I never pitched for the wedding, I didn't care. I was only a hairdresser there, I messed up the wedding up. And the people that I worked for kind of saw that there was something wrong. They're like, Tracy, they had a meeting with me and they're like, we've just found out that you've got bipolar. I'm like, I've got bipolar. And they're like, but you're not drinking all the time. And I was like, yes. Because even though I couldn't do the drugs and believe so because I didn't have the money and I didn't have whatever, I have a medication and my alcohol, and that's kind of what brought me to my knees quicker than anything else. And I remember just blacking out over and over and over, and I kind of couldn't even drive my scooter. I think I once got it out the driveway, and I crashed into the dustbin, and the security guard had to pull me back, put me back in. And that was kind of my life. Like, I had no connection with my family anymore. I moved to Bellito to be closer to my family. And my grand, I remember phoning me the one day and saying, Tracy, like, you moved here, and we don't see you. Bellito's a small town, everybody's talking about you, like, things are not okay. And I'm like, good, you just told me what to do. I'm like, I know this is my life, leave me alone. And then eventually I got it, and I had nothing. And I remember after 6 months, sitting on the stairs and just feeling like so alone, and like in a blackout. And the next morning I woke up and I was blacked out. Someone had stolen my scooter. I was locked in my flat, and people had to like break down the door. And I just remember being in that place where I was like, you know, they say too scared to live, like and too scared to die. I was like, I don't want to be like this anymore, but I just didn't know how to stop. Then I landed back in hospital again, and they didn't know how to treat me. They sent me out, and I was just in that very like suicidal place. But I don't even think I could have got it together enough to do that. But I was just alone, and I must have called out for help, because after that things started changing very quickly for me. The next thing, I was shifted off to Joburg. Everyone packed my stuff, and I was back. I was going into a rehab, and I didn't want to go because I'm like, I'm not an addict. I've got all these labels wrong with me, and I was cutting off the things. And in that time, my dad wrote me a letter, and he was like, Tracy, like, you're not okay, and you've been okay for a while, and I can't sit around and watch you. I've lost your mother, and I'm about to lose you, but I can't watch you doing this to yourself. If you don't get the help that I'm going to give you, then you're on your own. I actually have to wipe my hands off. And I knew my dad was very serious at that stage. Like, I knew I pushed him to the limit, and it wasn't okay, and I knew something deep inside me, like, I was like, oh. So I complied for a while. I stopped messing around with the counsellors. I stopped like doing what I needed to do, and I was like, okay. So I complied, and in that rehab, there were meetings. The first time I'd really been in AA and NA, and I started hearing things about God, and I was like, whoa. I'd stopped believing in God when I was 13. I was like, there's no place for God in my life. God would have never let that happen to me. A 6-year-old loses his mother, and my whole life is a mess up because of that. Like, how could that happen? So, and I grew up Catholic. My grandma is very Catholic. So I grew up to all of that, and I was like, not happening for me. I had an Archie tattoo on me, and I was like, and now they start talking about God, and I was like, oh, that's other people, not for me. And, but I started seeing that people were like living, you know. And then I got told, this is too short for you, you need to go for long-term treatment. And I was like, really, only 3 weeks. And I started looking around, and the rehab I would have gone into, and that's where God already started, is my ex-husband and my ex-boyfriend and everyone else I'd known who'd gone to that rehab, and they were amalgamating, and they're like, it's not a good idea for you to go there, you need to go somewhere else. So my dad started looking around, and they found 2 places in the coast, and the one was on the south coast, and there was no medication, and my dad's like, that's a good idea. And I'm like, what? So the counsellor at the time, Brian, was actually in Joburg visiting his sister, And he came to the rehab and he came and he spoke to me, and it was my first 12-step call, and he was telling me about like a new way to live, and like there might be an option, like you don't have to be on medication. And I'm like, no. Not gonna happen. And when I got there to the treatment center, Keith also said to me, listen, we don't do this, and we don't do this, we don't do interviews and whatever. And I was like, not happening. And I actually had a huge fight with him, and I slammed the door, and I was like, I'm not coming off my meds. Not a chance. The psychiatrist had just told me for 2 years I need to be clean before I can come off my medication because I'm unstable, and that's okay. And I held on to that for like a long time until I started seeing the power of the group, and I started seeing other people, and they were like, yes, they're on the same meds, and they're okay. And I'm like, oh, okay, good, you're okay. And I started seeing, and I was like, you know what? I haven't been okay for a long time, and I was sick of living like that, and I was like, okay, maybe I'm gonna try. And I was really, really scared, and I was like, okay, let's try this. And we came up with a schedule, and we came up, because it was very different in those days. Brian actually just did it, like there was no going to the doctors, no whatever. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try and trust you to do this. And there were times when they were cutting my medication, I wanted to stab them, because I was like, you can't cut my medication, I'm so scared, how am I going to live? And I went through a terrible detox. It was really, really bad for a long, long time, because I was on the maximum dosage of about 7 different meds. No wonder I could make a decision. No wonder I wasn't okay. And slowly it came through, and it was really long for me. And in that time, I started doing my step one. My step one took me a month. I don't even know how I did it. It was very like upside down, and I couldn't think things through. But in that, I saw how powerless I was, because I thought my dad should be in rehab and not me. And I kind of thought my life was quite manageable. And then I'm like, whoa, normal people are not doing what I'm doing. Normal people don't have like relationships like I have. They don't hurt people and manipulate and do things that I was doing to people. And then I was like, oh, that's not so nice. I don't like seeing that. And then kind of I started looking at step 2 and step 3, and when I had to start finding a power greater than myself, I was like, okay. And I remember my sponsor at the time, she took me outside and she's like, look how beautiful the trees are and how the moon and how everything kind of works together. She's like, something is creating that. And I'm like, okay, I can live with that. I'm like, I don't need to know how, because I used to be that person on coke. I used to like try and like tell people how God could not exist and whatever. And I'm like, who cares? It kind of works, and I could see it was working in other people's lives. And I'm like, I wanted that too. I wanted that like kind of freedom, and I kind of started with just believing and praying to my mattress and getting on my knees. I hadn't done that since I was 6 years old with my grandma. And something slowly started shifting and started working in my life. I did my step 4, and that was horrible to look at my stuff, because I was like, yes, it's my dad's fault, my grand's fault, my God's fault, because he took my mother away. And I had to look at that, and I'd never been able to get over my mother's death. I'd been for every kind of therapy, hypnotherapy, post-traumatic stress therapy, everything there was, and I could never get over my mom's death. Until I looked at my part. And my part was that I'd used her death my whole life to manipulate. I remember one of the last times on her birthday that I went to use, I was in the grave, and I'd used so much I couldn't find it. And I started panicking, the more I couldn't find her grave, the more I used. And I'm like, that's not means, like that's not okay. Later on in my first year, I took my chip to her 1 year grave, and I kind of gave it to her, and I was like, that's their means. And I chose her. She died on the 1st of July, and her birthday is the 4th of July, so my clean date's the 3rd of July, because I wanted to do that for her, like kind of as in the means, you know, and that's kind of where my date stayed. So I did my 4 and my 5, and kind of had to see my part, and it was really, really hard to kind of change that stuff. And my defects, I was like, really manipulative, willful. I was like, oh no, that's not nice. And I kind of had seen that, and I didn't want to. I'd caused a lot of problems in treatment, and I'd had all sorts of commands and all kinds of things. And at that stage, when I did my 6 and 7, I was like, I don't want to be this person anymore. I don't want to be the person that's causing trouble and hurt and whatever, and I want to change. And I tried the best that I could. And my means as well, my means list was quite big, but a lot of it was indirect means, especially because of my mom. And then when I kind of finished my steps, the fear kicked in, because I remember doing my step 4, and it says with the questions where, are you fearful? And I'm like, fearful of snakes, fearful of whatever. Wow. When I had to go out and try and find work, the fear hit me. And I think it was also because I'd been on medication for so long, and I had a lot of irrational fear, and I kind of didn't know how to cope with it. And I lived in it because I was like, I'm fearful, so I was like, fearful. And I always lived in a bubble. Like, I'd always had medication and I'd always been okay. And now I had to kind of live life in those terms. And I remember going to work in a hairdresser, and I hadn't worked for quite a long time, and I actually even forgot how to do stuff. And I was so fearful. And the fear just escalated during the day. And Brian had said to me, listen, if you're not okay today, don't worry, pick up the phone and we'll come fetch you. And Tracy, and I'm like, okay. And it just got so bad, and I had to do a head of foils. And I remember doing the foils, and the next thing the fear just hit me. And I was like, I have to go. And I picked up my stuff, and I left this lady with her foils on her head. And I left. And I remember standing outside in the coffee shop, and I phoned Brian, and I'm like, Brian, I'm not okay. And I had two choices. There was a coffee shop, and I knew I could have a glass of wine, and I'd be okay. Or I could do the other thing, and someone could come fetch me. And I just sat there. I don't know how. I must have missed like 40 minutes for someone to come fetch me. And Rob actually came to fetch me. And everything just changed, and I cried 2 days, 3 days, thinking, I can't do this. I'm like, I'm a disaster. I can't even do freaking recovery, right? And I had to redo things, and I had to go slowly. I couldn't do what other people could do. They could come in for 3 months and go. I had to stay 7 months. I had to do it slowly. There was no halfway house when I came out. So I had to go and live. Eventually, when it was time, I had to find a little flat, and it was God working as well. In December, this place is crazy. You can never find a place. And I found a place with no deposit. The rent was exactly what I needed, but it was above the chemist, which is my crack house, and by the pawn shop and the bottle store. And I was like, what the hell? But I was like, okay. And I spoke to my sponsor. She's like, every day you're just going to have to do it, and some days it's going to be okay, and some it's not. And it was like that. And I remember sitting there in my flat, and I got all my stuff back from storage, and everything was a disaster. And I was like, oh, how am I going to do this? And I was like, one day at a time. Do you know what I mean? And it was like, and then I realized like it's actually not so. I'm thinking a lot. Okay. So yeah, and then I realized how exciting it is. I'm like, I've got a new chance to live. I can do this how I want to do it. Do you know what I mean? And I masked people for so long. If you like pizza, I like pizza. If you like heavy metal, I like heavy metal. I actually like rap. Anyway, but I was like, whatever anyone else liked, that was how I was. And now I'm like, oh, so what do you like? I remember going for dinner at my sponsor's house, and her daughter said, do you like classical music? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, I have no idea. And my sponsor was like, no, this is fun to find out. And for that year that you're not supposed to be in a relationship was really difficult for me, because I'd always been in a relationship. Tracy could never be alone. And I kind of now was like, oh, okay. And I used that time to learn to see what I like to eat, what I like to music, and became the person that I wanted to become. And every night I went to a meeting, I believe I was blessed by fear, because if I didn't go to that meeting, I knew I wasn't okay. So I would get through the day, and there would be some days, because I didn't know how to answer the phone anymore, I didn't know how to speak to a client in a mirror. I was so fearful that I would go into the bathroom and get on my knees. The first time I used the bathroom on my knees. And I'd be like, please God help me. And I would kind of get through that, and I lived in with other people in the fellowship, and I kind of worked that program and like the best I could. In treatment, when they said, who's going to be the 3%, so I was like, I never put up my hand because I didn't know. But I just knew that I didn't want to be like I was, and I kind of kept doing one day at a time. And my first year was terrible. Hated it, didn't like it, nothing kind of felt like I was going through. I had to learn to live again like a baby. And I remember it being really hard. I was like, oh, this is recovery. I'm like, really? I'm like, I didn't have the gifts everyone else had. I didn't have the, like, everything would come right. It was very hard with my family. No one really wanted to forgive me at that stage. I had to prove, I had to go there and be awkward and not know how to speak to anybody. My dad and I, because we always drank together, like that was our thing. Now we were like, oh, how do we have a relationship together? I remember going to treatment, and he'd come and see me, and we'd walk for 3 hours around the property and be like, okay. And we had no relationship. We didn't know how to do that, and I had to kind of build on that my first year. And eventually, after my first year, the fear started coming away, and it started becoming easier for me. Everything became slowly easier. So then I decided to like mix it up with that. So now I was in my 14th month, and Rob asked me for, we've been in treatment together, but we were just friends, and we did it the right way. It's like, let's go for dinner. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay. So I asked my sponsor, and he'd asked his sponsor, and we kind of did it, and it was the most awkward pizza we've ever had. And then we had one piece of pizza, and we didn't know how to do it. We were like, oh, this is weird. And we were going to take it slowly, triadic style. Didn't really happen that way. And we kind of moved in together, I think, within the first year. And it was really difficult because I'd learned how to do my recovery myself. And now all of a sudden I had to do recovery with someone else. and put someone else first. And defects came right up. All of a sudden I was very controlling, I was very jealous, I was all those things I never knew I was, and I had to kind of work through those defects, and we had to learn to live like that. And for the first 2 years it was really, really difficult. And work kind of, I left hairdressing for a while, and God has always been showing me the way. It's been quite strange, and I'd never known how to turn on a computer in recovery. I had a very controlling ex-husband that didn't want me to really know how to use the internet. And I had to learn those things in recovery, and I had that for 4 years. And now I'm blank. After 4 years of recovery, what happened? We kind of moved into our house where we're still at for 13 years. We've been there for about 13 years. I think we got married about 5 years into recovery. I decided to stop smoking in 5 years. That was really hard. That was even more difficult than giving up medication. I was like, oh my gosh, I never thought that could happen. And in my first years of recovery, I'd actually had an eating disorder, and I didn't know it was the one part of my disease I didn't want to deal with. I was like, God can have everything else, and I'll deal with that kind of stuff, but with my eating and the way I look, because I wanted to look a certain way, because I thought if I looked a certain way, even in recovery, everyone would love me. And I kind of did, and I lost a lot of weight, and it became my obsession, but it was like a secret obsession. I didn't want anyone to know, and then I gave up smoking, and everything went to literally a board of shots. And I had to learn to practice my program again, and I remembered 5 years of recovery, being in that same place where I didn't want to pick up. Thank God the obsession to use has been lifted from me, but I didn't want to feel the way I did. And I remember being at my sponsor's house and saying to her, I'm not okay, and I'd rather die being like this. And I called out for help again. And I had to do things differently in 5 years of recovery. I had to do different steps, I did different meetings, I did a different program. Like, it was still the same program, and it's still the same basis, but I had to work on that kind of stuff. I had to work on my eating stuff and where it came from, like why I was like that. And it helped me for a long time. And I loved that, I did that part of my program. I did both, I did everything. And eventually that came out, and then Rob and I got married. We had the most amazing wedding. We got married in recovery. And I remember just before I got married, I was really scared. And Don was, he was marrying us. We got married in court, and then he did our thing. Our whole wedding was on recovery. And I remember being really fearful, because I'm like, I've been married before, I messed it up, it wasn't okay. And he's like, listen, Tracy, your recovery is one day at a time. He's like, to your relationship is one day at a time, your marriage, and that's what our marriage is based on. You're not going to get it right every day, but tomorrow's a new day, and you can try again. And you can try and live like that, and that's how we've kind of done our marriage. And we've just had, I think, 9 years of anniversary of marriage. I mean, that's amazing. We never thought that was possible. And 2 years into our marriage, we decided we were going to have a child. We were getting older now in recovery. I thought all of a sudden, I'm like, I need to grow up a bit. And we fell pregnant, and that was amazing. I had Reeve, he was my upside down child, he was breech, and nothing ever went to plan right from when we had him. He had colic, and for 2 years I didn't sleep, and it was crazy, it was really, really crazy. But I really struggled with my mom's death, because I was like, I didn't have her for the first time, and I had to learn to live with that kind of stuff. Then we decided we were going to have one child, and God had another plan. And surprise, we had Leah. And we fell pregnant, and I wasn't on medical aid, and we were like, oh my gosh, what the hell? And I remember being really fearful, and thank goodness she's not in the room. I was thinking of terminating. I was like, I don't think we can go through this again. Financially, we're not okay. I don't want to do this. And I went to go speak to my sponsor, and Rob went to go speak to his sponsor. And both of them said at the same time, when have you never been okay? When has God never had your back? And I'm like, but how is this going to work? Can I get sick when I'm pregnant? And I know that. And he had our back every step of the way. I remember being really sick all of a sudden, and we were in the government hospital, and I got a phone call from my sister-in-law, and she said, Tracy, get out of there. She's like, you need to go to the doctor, everything is going to be taken care of, you're okay. And I remember going to this doctor, and I sat there, and I was happy, and I'm not okay. And they said, look, we can't help you. The doctor's going away, he's not wanting to take you on, you're going to have to come back tomorrow. And I was like, well, I can't do anything, I'm stuck. So I sat there and I prayed. And my friend was having a baby at the same time. She walked in, and the next thing this lady said, listen, I've wasted 20 minutes for my appointment. She's like, I'm going to go to Ria, I'm out of here. And the lady just looked at me and said, here's your appointment. I'm like, thank you. And I got to see the doctor. And from that step, everything just kind of happened. We ended up having a baby in a private hospital. We were like, what the hell? How does this kind of stuff happen? And I had Leia at 31 weeks. She was 7 months. We went to go see the doctor, and he's like, this baby's coming out tomorrow. No chance. And I'm like, I'm 7 months pregnant. I'm like, how is this baby going to look? She's going to look like a little chicken. And like, no, it's okay. And I just remember praying the whole time, and I'm like, God, you haven't taken me this far to let me go. And he didn't. And I remember having Leia, and she was like the most beautiful little thing that you've ever seen. She was tiny, and she was healthy, and she was okay. And we spent 3 weeks at NICU, and it was amazing because Rob and I had to go every day to the hospital, and our relationship hadn't been great because we'd had kids and everything was like all over the place, and we got to spend every day together and got to build our relationship and be there for our daughter. And we got to bring her home. Didn't pay 1 cent towards it at the hospital because all of a sudden I remembered my meditation. I'm like, oh, Rob's on medical aid. The kids are under Rob. So Leia was sorted out. Like, it was just one miracle after another. Like, that's the amazing part about this program. The longer you're in it, the more you'll see the miracles. Not just financially, just with other people. And that's what kept bringing me back. Like, every time, like, I think, oh my God, like, what's going to happen? And I'm like, I just know that God's got this. I think I should be nearly running out of time here. Okay, yeah. So after Leia was born, I went to go, I had my dream job. I went to go work in the rehab where I thought that this was it. Like, and I worked there for 4 years, and I loved it. I loved being part of everybody's lives. I loved carrying the message, and I thought, and it was what I really wanted. Like, I think that it was my will, to be honest. And last year I was retrenched, and I was really upset because I was like, I thought that was where I was supposed to be, and I kind of had to let go. And I had to let go of my idea of how I thought I wanted my life, you know, and I was like, I just didn't think that was fair, and but I had to realize that God's got this, God's got everything, and God's got a bigger plan. But when you're in it, and you've got financial fear, and you've got whatever fear, it's really difficult to kind of let go. And in that time, I'd forgotten how to take step 3, and I'd forgotten, and I was kind of in a lonely place of my life. Like, I felt like there wasn't many women further on with a lot of experience. I didn't really have that kind of connection anymore. And I went to a wedding, and there was this lady that had 20 years clean, and I knew her right from the beginning, and I started like reaching out to her, and I was like, this is how I'm feeling. I'm getting old in recovery. That's what happens, by the way, guys. You get much older and your body starts changing, and I was going through hormonal things, and I wasn't feeling okay anymore. And I could speak to this lady, and we started building a relationship again. My sponsor was very similar at that time to me, so she didn't have much of a solution for the things that I was going through. And I started speaking to this lady, and eventually after I got retrenched, and I felt like I was living in the sea, like and it was going nowhere. I just felt like I was going nowhere. I didn't know where, I had no direction. And I asked her one day, and I was like, please can you sponsor me? And she's like, and I told her how I felt, and she said, sure, Tracy, I'll be your rock for a while. She's like, I will help you. And she has, and she's been amazing. And it was a very hard year for me because I had to learn to take step 3 again. I remember going every morning. I used to drop the kids off and walk to night, train my dog, all the way and meditate. I had the most amazing tan last year. I kind of meditated every day. But I kind of had to learn to let go again because I'd forgotten. And everyone's like, step 3, and I'm like, oh yeah. And really like let go and say, okay, God, you have got this. I had to go back into hairdressing, and I hated hairdressing. I was like, I do not want to go back into hairdressing. Please do not let me go back into hairdressing. And there was a whole list of reasons why I didn't want to go back in. And the way that it kind of worked out was I am back in hairdressing, and I'm actually loving it because all the things I didn't like, God was like, okay, cool, I'll place you here. I'm working in a retirement village, and I am loving it because I'm of service to all the people. I don't have commission. I went to go to the lady, and I'm like, okay, cool, how much is the rent? No rent. You don't need to pay rent. This is if you can come 3 hours a day and do this. And I'm like, wow. Because Leia was actually having anxiety about me working so much. She was struggling. Every morning she was throwing up before we went to school. And I didn't realize like how, because it was my plan and not God's plan. I'm now there for my children. We've started grade 1 this year, and I've been there for every rugby, cricket, whatever match, whatever. I've been able to go there and fetch him from school. I've been able to be a mom. I've been able to do those kinds of things. And in my year, I had a relationship with my grand, moved down to Rennie Shore Hills here. And in that time when I was retrenched, I saw her every week. We went for coffee, and we spent a lot of time. And I'm very grateful because this year she's landed up having dementia. And it's been something that I've had to deal with. It's still something I'm going through. Because I'm still a selfish addict, and when I started seeing that she was going through changes, I was like, it's all about me, and she's not being there. And this week I went to have coffee with her, and her husband told me she's not okay and she's really sick, like she's got dementia and whatever. And I was so grateful. I said to Rod the other night, I was like, how amazing is that I've had that year with my grand, like when she was still okay, that I've been able to spend it. And he's like, well, maybe that's what it was about. Do you know what I mean? And I've had that with my kids and my grand, and I've had all of those things. I'm like, wow. And in every time I've been looked after, every time I was like, I remember when my package money was running out, I was like, oh my gosh. And then the UI thing came through for 3 months. Hey, I was like, what? How does that work? Do you know what I mean? Like every time I'm kind of looked after, the longer I'm in this program and the longer I see that, I see that. And I see God's hand in everything. So yeah, I've been able to do that. My dad this year as well has had emphysema. Thank goodness I stopped smoking when I did. And he's been on permanent oxygen. I've had my aunt she was like my mom for a long time. She's had breast cancer and she got retrenched at the same time. How weird is that as well? She got retrenched at the same time. So every day we would phone each other, every day we'd do the UIF thing together. We kind of had that bond, you know what I mean? That we could be there for each other. So in that I've made my indirect amends to my family. And it's just every day kind of showing up. So I think I've run out of time now. But yeah, I'm so grateful to have been part of that and part of this fellowship, and then how I can keep changing, keep helping each other, and how it's grown. Like when we used to come in, there was just a few people, and how there's so many people, and how this fellowship has grown. I'm so grateful to every person that's in this meeting and that I could share. So thank you very much.